our chairman, Nick Crowley, is going to talk to us tonight. He's spoken to the Society several times. In fact, I think this is the 5th talk that Nick is doing for the group. And tonight we're going to do 2 areas. He's going to start off with a trip around northern Spain, and then we're going to flip and go around southern Morocco. So I hope you all have a thoroughly good evening, and I'll now hand over to Nick to start the talk.
I'm very conscious that not many people, if any, had a holiday last year because it was such a terrible year for the country, and very likely most people had to cancel holidays abroad if they had one booked. Obviously we book holidays in advance, so it's just good fortune that we actually managed to have 2 holidays almost in sequence early in the year, literally just before lockdown, and we weren't clever, we were just very lucky, and I'm conscious that a lot of people didn't have the opportunity we did, so we're very grateful. We got there and we got back twice, but only just. The first time we left England on the 21st of March. So you can see, no, it was the 21st of February, sorry. And we're quite close to lockdown, but we were pretty much oblivious to what was going to happen. We went on a nature trek holiday to northern Spain. We would have met people at Zaragoza at the airport if we'd flown, but we thought we'd like to have a go at going to Europe by train to go on wildlife holidays, because it was a perfectly good alternative to flying. So when we eventually got to Zaragoza, we found that 2 other people had also done the same, although the rest of the people had all come by air. We got up very early and left St. Pancras, and we were due to get to Barcelona that afternoon. It all should have worked smoothly. We did eventually get there, but we were subject to speed restrictions in Kent and then again in northern France. So by the time we got to Paris, we got on the metro and we hurried across to Gare de Lyon. Unfortunately, we arrived 5 minutes late for a connection to Barcelona. We were able to rebook, but we had 5 hours to spare. We had a very nice lunch, but we couldn't really spin it out over 5 hours. So we filled in time. The one disadvantage of the train journey in the afternoon is that by the time you get to southern France, along the Mediterranean coast with the lagoons and flamingos, it was dark. We arrived in Barcelona at our hotel in the evening quite satisfactorily. There was no sort of very late arrival. We woke the next day, and from the balcony we looking out onto this park that is shown the night before, all illuminated, and it was a very noisy scene with a lot of monk parakeets. And apparently, although they're much the most common one, there are 7 species of parakeet that have established themselves in Barcelona. We took the Renfe, Spanish equivalent of the TGV, a rapid train to Zaragoza, which is 2 hours journey from Barcelona. And we spent 2 nights in Zaragoza, which is a very interesting city. It's the 5th biggest city in Spain. It is a Roman city, but then the Christian architecture, which is evident here, and the Moorish architecture makes it a very interesting stay. And we had no difficulty spending 2 days there while we waited to join the others for our trip. You can see here on the right-hand side, that would formerly have been a minaret, but is now part of a Christian church. One of the delights of Zaragoza is that it's not quite the birthplace of Goya. He's born in a village a few miles from Zaragoza, but he grew up in Zaragoza. He's educated there, and he then moved to Madrid. But I would recommend it as a very interesting city to visit. We went to join the people at the airport. This is the mighty river Ebro, which is one of Spain's big rivers. This one flows southeastwards and enters the Mediterranean between Barcelona and Valencia. When we met the group at the airport, that evening we drove north for about 2 hours, and we're in the foothills of the Pyrenees. Sorry. This is the national park of mountains and canyons of Guara, which is beautiful and not particularly well known. We stayed in Alcázar. I haven't missed the accent off the E, but that's where the emphasis is. It's a beautiful small town, a walled one, that is built into the rocks, the limestone rocks. Above there's the Vero Gorge. We spent 3 nights there. It's a very nice place to stay, and apart from the wildlife, it's an interesting place to explore. On the first morning, before our breakfast, we went to see what birds we could see from the top of the Vero Gorge. This is February, and the almond blossom is visible, as you'll see here and in other pictures. Besides griffin vultures and choughs, these are some of the birds that we saw on that first morning before breakfast. Okay, with the nice views of a hawfinch, the Alpina Center. The actual tour is called Wall Creepers and Cranes, and the wall creepers are very obvious in the gorge in the winter. They've come down from the high mountains, and as you can see, we weren't just seeing them on the gorge side. They're in the actual town, feeding on the walls and on the tracks. One of the highlights of our time in Alcázar was a visit we made to a village called Santa Cilia. And this gentleman, Manu, 40 years ago, he was just wandering in the hills near that village, and he saw a lammergeier, the bearded vulture, dropping bones onto a rock surface. And prior to his viewing of them, the bird was not known to the scientific community to be in that area. He's wearing a red jacket, and as soon as he puts the red jacket on and he picks up his wheelbarrow after his visit to the abattoir to pick up bones, he is greeted in the sky by a mass of birds. This is the scene with perhaps 40 griffin vultures in the air. They've seen him in his red coat, and they know what he's going to do. The supplementary feeding that they do a couple of times a week, but they vary the day, so as the birds don't get accustomed to what's going on, the supplementary feeding is intended to help the lammergeier, but other birds obviously have benefited, especially the griffin vultures. He gets us to sit away from him, and we have to keep completely quiet. And for some reason, the birds don't like our rucksacks, so they have to be tucked away behind a bush. And he goes and sits on the stone slab that he originally saw the bones being dropped onto 40 years ago. He knows some of these vultures by name, and they seem to know him. The majority keep away, and some of the following pictures show you what fantastic views we got of these vultures. A lot of the pictures are not taken by me, but by Prue. In these pictures that follow, you can see there's two pinky red patches either side of the bird's neck. And when they've really had their fill of food, their crops swell, and these patches are masked and you don't see them. But when they're visible, it's an indication that they're hungry, they're ready to eat. You can see their long necks ready to, without a lot of feathers on, ready to delve into the carcass. And then they strip the bones that he's thrown out on this rock slab. You become aware, if you look carefully up in the sky, that there are some bearded vultures or lammergeier. They're not in a hurry. The bones are not going to go anywhere. They're waiting for the griffin vultures to get out the way, waiting for them to have picked clean the bones that they're interested in. So 2 or 3 will come down, and this stone slab, you can see, is fairly clear of rocks. It's clear of vegetation, and it's been selected by the lammergeiers as one that is suitable for dropping the bones onto in order to break them so they can get at the marrow in the bones. The reddish colour, reddish brown, is earth. It's red, perhaps terracotta type dust that they bathe in. But even with a lot of research, people have never been able to find where they go in order to dust bathe like this. But we got fantastic views of not only the griffin vultures, but the bearded vulture. This is the profile of the bearded vulture as seen from the village of Santa Cilia. You've got this very distinctive wedge-shaped tail. This is the rock surface, and you can see the vultures can take off from it, and they can come in and land on it, but it's sloping sufficiently that they can take off. It's receiving enough heat to give the birds a bit of lift off when they fed. This is the view from the village of Santa Cilia, and the rock slab that we're talking about is the one right in the middle of the photograph, surrounded by the vegetation, but an area of bare rock, quite substantial and sloping quite steeply. This is a sketch from my diary. Basically, this sort of explains what's going on. You've got a stone surface that is pretty free of obstructions like vegetation and rocks. onto which bones can be dropped. It's also receiving enough heat that the birds can lift off after feeding. And what they do is they make their way to the village, and then they pick up the thermals from the roof tiles in the village that provide the upcurrents that they can use to climb. That same day, we returned to Alcázar, and we descended into the Vero Gorge. This is a deep limestone gorge, and you can walk on paths and some of these metal walkways. These are called passerellas. It's guided. You have to wear helmets and be careful, but it's very enjoyable. This is the valley that we're walking down through. The Mediterranean vegetation extends to this part of Aragon, and then shortly to the west, you begin to move to the Atlantic vegetation, but you'll see some of the characteristic Mediterranean vegetation in the next few pictures as we climb out of the gorge. There's a number of species of arums, spurges, you've got rosemary and those sort of typical Mediterranean herbs. After 3 days, we made the changeover. We're on our way southwards, back past Zaragoza and a bit further south. This is typical Spanish landscapes of that part of Spain that we would be driving through in order to get to our second destination, which is Galocanta. This is a very famous site for bird watchers in northern Spain. The village of Galocanta is where we are staying, and the lagoon contains water in winter. It's shallow. This is an inland drainage area. It's like a collapsed limestone cave system underneath. It's what's called a polgy, and it's not deep. In the hot summer, this will all evaporate, and it'll be a large salt pan. Although there are bigger salt pans, obviously, on the coast, this is the biggest salt pan in inland Spain, and it's the roosting site for the common crane as they migrate. At that time of the year, February, it's not going to get light particularly early. So we're getting up early, but we didn't have to be here until 6:45. Later in the year, if you're getting up, you're going to get up a lot earlier to see the wildlife. But the owner of the guest house is essentially from a farming family, and this would be their farmland, and they get us in place while it's still dark. This is a cold morning, and we're sheltering in the ruins of an old farm barn, and as far as we're concerned, there's no wildlife in view. And then about half an hour later, as dawn arrives, you begin to be aware that there's some dots down in the lake or lagoon, and there's a huge area of water that is not all in the picture, but our host reckoned that there's about 10,000 cranes there that morning. Gradually, as the light increases, you become aware of hazy shapes. These begin to be recognizable as big birds with long legs and long necks. And it gets very noisy and lighter. and then some of the birds begin to lift off. And as it gets lighter, more and more of them begin to fly up. They're making their way northwards. They're going to cross the Pyrenees, and it's quite windy on that particular morning, and some of them might decide, no, I'm not going today, I'm going to come back round and roost again. But this is what begins to happen. You can see the formations that they're flying in. They're flying northwards. Some of these, I think, are coming back. They've decided that it's too windy. We're not going yet. It's the wind's in the wrong direction. This is the kind of farmland that surrounds the lagoon. It's very nice habitat for bird watching. So besides the masses of cranes, there is a lot of other bird interest. The cranes feed in the surrounding fields, and then they roost for safety in the lagoon. This is taken from a display board in a visitors centre. If you find Spain and you find the line that separates the border between Spain and France, and you come to the third red circle downwards, that's the Lagoon de Gallicanta. And you've got a whole lot of stopping sites shown here. The Lagoon Gallicanta is possibly the biggest and best one, but you can see the journey northeastwards through France and Germany towards Sweden and Finland, where a lot of the birds are aiming for. Now, we were there in that you've got two dates towards the bottom, the 20th and the 27th of February. This is the passage pre-breeding, and you can see, if the people aren't in the way, the sort of numbers that you have. We're there in a peak number of birds. Invernada is the winter period. You've got a lot of birds that are wintering there, although the majority are going further south to Estremadura and Cota Doñana for the winter. And then the top set of figures are all the return journey. And you can see how another time that you might go and see the cranes would be in the autumn. Now, besides the cranes, we saw great bustards. This isn't obviously a very good picture, so this is not our picture, it's from the internet, but it shows the superb bird. There's lots of corn buntings, which of course have largely disappeared from the English countryside. And this gives some idea of the richness of the area compared to many parts of other parts of Europe. And on the way to the airport on the final day, they took us to Belchite, and I've put these in because it's an interesting aspect of the holiday and the visit. But this part of Spain was on the front line between Franco's forces and the Republicans. This town was fought over. And basically, you can see in the coming pictures that it's a monument to the destruction of war. Some people would say that this being deliberately left like this so that people understand that we don't want this sort of thing to happen again. This is a monument to the horror of that Spanish Civil War. Other people say it was deliberately left by Franco so that it was a warning to people challenge me, and this is what can happen to you. I'd like to end this first bit on a happier note. After we'd been to Belchite, we went to El Planaron, and this is a big steppe reserve. It's particularly been purchased and looked after for, amongst other birds, Dupont's lark and the pin-tailed sandgrouse. Dupont's lark is virtually impossible to see. One morning, they took us out early before dawn again, and we went to a site where for about 20 minutes before sunrise, you can hear the birds. They sound like they're very close to you, and they probably are, but you're never going to see them. And I think this is a picture of Dupont's lark in the poster, and I've put this in because people have been going to the bird fair for very long periods of time. The Rutland Bird Fair had its money-raising objective one time in the past to provide funds to buy this site of El Planaron in northern Spain. We came back to England quite innocently for the inside of a week, and we had a birthday to celebrate, so we actually booked a second trip, and I innocently wrote in my diary on the 7th of March, the UK is in the early stages of the COVID-19 virus epidemic, not pandemic. We left the same day. We left on the 7th of March. We flew on a trip that was not a nature trip one this time. It was with a new company to us, the Wildlife Holidays. And they started in the same year as Nature Trek, that has grown into the huge company that we now know. But they've remained very small. They pass all their profits to the wildlife trusts, and consequently some of the profits from this trip would come to Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust, because we were members of Leicestershire Rutland Wildlife, and we would highly recommend this company. We really enjoyed this trip, and one of the things they said, you're on holiday, so we don't get up at crack of dawn in order to go and see what we can see. But the other thing that really impressed me was that the leaders didn't sort of say, well, we only concentrate on birds. They knew all about plants, they knew all about trees, they knew all about the culture of the country. And this was another superb time that we had. Agadir is in southern Morocco. It is a holiday destination for quite a lot of people, beach holiday. And it's at the western end of the High Atlas Mountains. In the area of Marrakech, if you look, it's not that far from Agadir. That would be in the High Atlas. Just to the southeast of Agadir is the Anti-Atlas, which in Berber means pre-Atlas. They're smaller, less high, but very ancient rocks. And we're exploring the western end of the High Atlas and the Anti-Atlas in that part of South Morocco. You can see Spain in the north. And one of the things that's quite interesting is that in the past, the common cranes would have migrated to this area near Agadir, but now they stop in places like Cotonou and Estremadura. They no longer migrate this far south in the winter. We stayed in a fantastic eco-lodge. Kasbah means castle or fortified house. This is a modern but traditionally styled building in the form of a fortified house. It's an eco-lodge where the picture's taken down in the land, the garden below the eco-lodge, and it's irrigated with grey water from the hotel. There's all sorts of aspects of the building and its operations that are very ecologically sound. You can see what a nice garden and surrounds it has, and the interior is equally appealing. The styles are traditional, it's very nicely decorated, but it's all modern. And it was a super place to spend a week. One of the nice aspects of this was that you're not moving around all the time. You're there for one whole week. That's the building in what's called the Argan forest. To our eyes, it isn't really a forest. It's trees that are quite widely spaced, but the Argan tree is really interesting. It's endemic to this part of Morocco, just a small area near to Agadir and the Anti-Atlas. This is a very arid area of land. This is farmland with trees. These are the Argan trees in closer at hand. They'd had 2 days rain in the past year, so you get some idea of how short the water supply is. They got a lovely bark. This is typical sort of farmland. You've got some fields, Argan trees. The Argan trees are all the property of the state. That you're not allowed to cut them down, and the processing of the fruit from the Argan trees is all by royal decree done in women's cooperatives, and this sort of raises the standard of living of people, the Berber people living in rural areas. The Argan trees are in flower. They have to contend with a lot of goats that will climb trees to eat the fruit. There's major overgrazing in large areas of southern Morocco. It's not just goats, there's lots of sheep, there are camels that we saw. It's thoroughly overgrazed. These are the fruit on the Argan trees. If you look at the higher in the photograph, you can see the trees also in flower. You can have the previous season's fruit on the tree, as well as it being in flower that year, and even the sort of dried up husks of even earlier crops. The fruit is picked up off the ground and dried in the sun. These are some that have just been arranged for demonstration purposes at the eco-lodge. But if we work through the sequence of these photos, they're dehusked. That's in the bottom bowl. Then you have the nut. Now that has to be split. And the women in the cooperatives would do this on a stone anvil, and they will use a stone still in order to strike the nut. And then you have in the third bowl the seed, and the seed will be crushed in order to extract the oil. And the byproduct, the sort of mush left over, might be made into biscuits like in the top bowl and fed to donkeys. But if you look on high-end cosmetics, shampoos and things, you will see it says contains argan oil. All argan oil comes from this part of Morocco, and the Berber people would have used it traditionally to cook with. They'd also use it for medication and for soap. But it's now so valuable to them that they no longer cook with it. You can buy it to cook with in Britain, but it will be expensive. A lot of it's going to into cosmetics and shampoos in Western countries. This is a traditional quern, which would be used to grind the nuts to extract the oil. In some of the argan trees near the eco lodge were these cylinder-like hollow pipes placed in the trees. Basically, these are beehives, and here they are stacked up. They're made from a grass called Arundodonax, and these woven tubes are waiting in anticipation when the nomadic honey and hive people will follow the rains and the bloom in the semi-arid area, and the insects and bees that will follow, and they slot these beehives into the trees in order to get them full of bees and honeycomb. As I said, you no longer cook with argan oil, but they would traditionally be used to make tagines. And we bought argan oil to bring home to make tagines. And this is a class that some of us attended to make tagines. They're being made on charcoal in a traditional way. We visited some interesting places. Taroudant is a completely walled, mud and stone walled city. It's like a mini Marrakech with Medina and Souk, and it's a stopping point on the caravan routes that came from Timbuktu going northwards towards other places in Morocco. We went up onto the walls to look for little swifts, but they were away, so we contented ourselves with other wildlife. You've got the kestrel here. This is in the Medina, within the walls. The Berber people are very friendly, very helpful, and we thoroughly enjoyed and felt very safe and welcome in their presence. This is in the souk. We visited this stall with our guide in order to buy spices that we could bring home to make traditional tagines. One of the nice aspects of shopping and buying things there, you don't haggle. You are told this is the price and that's what you pay, which was very welcome. Another place we visited is Taroudant. These are the remains of the old settlement, and down below you perhaps get the idea that there's a lot of verdant vegetation. This is an oasis settlement on the margins of the Anti-Atlas Mountains in the south. The water comes gushing out of the rocks, although they've had so little rain. You have these wonderful gardens and cool places where you can sit with the water that's come out of the Anti-Atlas. Another place that obviously we drove around and visited to some degree is Agadir. You can see the huge sandy beach that is the source of the modern day tourist industry. And if you look on the extreme left of the picture, you can see some areas to the left of the big road that are not built on. Oops. And space is at a premium, and yet this site will always remain empty now. This is the site of Old Agadir, which was destroyed in a terrible earthquake in 1960, when a quarter of the population died and a further quarter were injured. And this will always be left as a grave site. It will not be built on. We're going to visit the Anti-Atlas, which I said is an area of very ancient rock. On the margins of it, we went to a town called Eight Baha for a refreshment stop. The common refreshment is sweet mint tea. They had lots of different types of tea at the Eco Lodge, but really the mint tea is the one that is most popular. You pour it from height so as to create a lot of bubbles in order to make an impressive glass of tea if you're doing it properly. It's a leather working town, and we visited a shoe cooperative next door. And these are some of the fine products modelled by Prue. She brought home this nice pair of green slippers. The word Agadir crops up again here. It literally means fortified grain store. This is in a remote Berber village, Latik, and this is about 700 years old, this structure. It would be thought of perhaps as part bank and part store. When a village is under attack, you go into this structure. Inside, you'll find that there are lots of doorways into recesses, and there are sort of like giant cupboards that you would walk into, and you climb up these stones in order to access ones that are higher up. And a family would have one of these in which they would put their jewelry, their documents, since it's a bit like a bank. And under attack, it would be big enough for you to put children and females into one of these while the building was defended. And if it had to be defended for a while, within this structure, this area that's walled, you would have a well, you'd have a communal kitchen, and they even had a jail inside. We weren't there for very long. There was some kind of misunderstanding and people didn't really want us to be there, but it's a really interesting structure. That's what an Agadir literally is, a fortified grain store. Besides the Anti-Atlas, we also went into the Western High Atlas. These mountains would lead up 2 or 3 hours drive away to Marrakech. There is water in these mountains. This is Paradise Valley with flowing water, and oleander in the foreground. This area of Morocco is very, very interesting because it's where Mediterranean vegetation, Sahara vegetation, and Canary vegetation all meet. So it's got a real diversity. The oleander source, which is spread obviously throughout the Mediterranean, is this part of Morocco. In the Anti-Atlas, there are interesting vegetation. These are the thuya. It's a conifer that you find cladding the slopes of this part of the Western Anti-Atlas, Western High Atlas. Now, besides some of the better photographs being taken by Prue, we've got a few photographs taken by our leaders, and you'll be able to see which they are. He's got his name in the bottom left here, James Lowen. I'm going to show you some of the interesting birds that we saw at various different sites. A real speciality of this tour is to see the bald ibis. This is a colonial bird, and it nests on the cliffs to the north and to the south of Agadir. There are just 2 sites, although there's an introduction site in southern Spain now. The birds feed on the steppe, and then they come down to the water to bathe and to drink. They're very scruffy looking animals, but they were superb and very rare and a great joy to see. This is the largest of the African ostriches. It's the red-necked ostrich. And like the antelopes and things I'll show you shortly, these have both virtually been hunted to extinction in Morocco. The land has been so grazed, some parts have been very developed, and they've also been hunted. But this is a very fine animal. This is another one of James's photos. We're in the Souss Massa National Park here. That's a view across part of the Souss Massa National Park. You can see how arid it is, and you might think there isn't a lot of vegetation, but when I show you a contrast in and outside the park, you'll see that there's much more vegetation here than outside. The ostriches and the various antelopes that I'm going to show you are protected. There are breeding programs with the view to and the actual happening of reintroductions into southern Morocco and also into Chad. Prue captured a nice family of many ostrich chicks here. This is in the oasis at Toot, the white stork. This is a speciality and a rarity, one that a lot of very keen bird watchers would want to see if they went on a specialist birding holiday to Morocco. Looks quite similar to a Dartford warbler. This is Tristram's warbler. Moussier's Redstart is beautiful. It was in the grounds of the Kasbah Eco Lodge. Here it is in the Argan trees. It's plentiful. It's Morocco's national bird, but it's special to Morocco. You won't find this bird in Spain. This, along with the laughing dove and another one I'll show you later, the house bunting. These are specialists and restricted to Morocco. Yeah, there's the house bunting. The familiar kestrel, another bird that we're familiar with is the grey wagtail. People who are visiting southern Europe will see the southern grey shrike. So it's not particular to Morocco. Nor is the hoopoe. Maghreb in Arabic means the land of the setting sun. So to people from Arabia and areas further east than Morocco, Morocco is the land of the setting sun, the land in the west. And that's what Maghreb means. Now the Maghreb magpie is like ours, but look at the blue around the eye and just behind the eye. That's not feathers, but skin. There's lots of different larks. This is Theclas. Woodchat Shrike. Please excuse the very big blue arrow. It's trying to point out that among the Argan trees there's a little owl. Almost like ours, but the Moroccan Chaffinch. And then this is in Paradise Valley, that area of water and rocks that I showed you earlier. The blue rock thrush, the black wheatear. Back in the Souss Massa National Park, not a very clear picture, I'm afraid, but that's the cream coloured courser. And in the Souss Massa National Park, some of the antelope animals, the smallest is the Dorcas Gazel. That's the Dorcas Gazel again. The Addax, that's a better picture of it here, and you can see with its magnificent horns, perhaps they explain the reason that this animal gets hunted virtually in the past to extinction. The most beautiful of them, in my opinion, the Scimitar-horned Oryx, and this is James Lowen's picture of it. These animals are breeding successfully. They're going to be reintroduced into southern Morocco and also into Chad. This is the scant vegetation of this semi-arid region, but outside the boundaries of the park, this is what it would look like. And overgrazing is a major issue, and that would be one of the reasons why these animals have become so scarce. Some of the other animals, Barbary ground squirrel, they eat argan nuts. Under stones, people were turning up yellow scorpions. Large numbers of geckos and lizards. I'm going to show you a whole lot of them. This is the Moorish Gecko, the Moroccan Lizard Toad Gecko, Margarita's Fringe-toed lizard. I think this is very restricted to just small parts of Morocco. Golden Fringe-toed lizard, the Moroccan Day-Gecko, and again, dung beetles. Couple of pictures coming up of North African amphibian. These are the water frogs. This is back in the oasis where obviously there's a lot of water. And there's the Berber toad. Bibram's agama, and again, and again. Spur-thighed tortoise. We saw quite a lot of tortoise. This is in the area of Paradise Valley where there was the river, the Moorish Terrapin. Right, some of the beautiful butterflies. This is James Lowen's picture, as you can see, bottom left. The Moroccan Orange Tip. This is one of the blues. Greenish Black-tip. This is in the gardens of the Kasbah Eco Lodge. Painted ladies, they winter in Morocco, and if we're lucky, they make their way in stages some years in large numbers. Gradually, I think they move from Morocco to breed near Barcelona, and then the next generation move on, and they may arrive in Britain, and then they fly very high on their return journey to winter in Morocco. That's the common tiger blue. Where there's water, we've found some dragonflies. This is the Atlantic, and the scrub vegetation. I'm going to show you a little bit of the plants to finish with. This is wild stachys. The oleander we've referred to earlier. And here it is growing in the dried up riverbeds, but obviously underneath there is some semblance of moisture still. The vegetation is often without leaves. It's spiny and spiky in order to protect itself from grazing animals. Sea heath is the small plant. Back in the oasis, there's things like maidenhair ferns. This is a poisonous plant, Sodom's apple milkweed. A toadflax, I think this is a specialist of Morocco. That's the same plant. I'm sure this is probably named by Northern Europeans rather than people in Morocco, but maybe they have the same views of mother-in-laws, which are obviously very unfair, but this is called mother-in-law's seat for some reason. Another beautiful milkwort. Note that it's no leaves, spikes. Here it is in flower. And if you are in the right areas where you might be a bit higher and it'll be a bit cooler and moister, then you're going to come across the Mediterranean vegetation, and these are almonds. The dark bark trees are all almonds. The Barbary nut comes into flower after the middle of the day. Like our stinging nettle, but this is the Roman stinging nettle. And these are the doors or gates to the Atlas Kasbah. Now you can see 3 languages here. You've got Atlas Kasbah in English. Above it, in Arabic, would be Atlas Kasbah. The children in school would be educated in French and Arabic, but at home they would speak Berber. And Berber was, like a lot of the culture, persecuted really. And a lot of the people would have said in the past that they were Arabic or Arabs, but now they would proudly say, with the more enlightened times that exist, that they're Berbers and they have a very rich culture. The Berber language has only recently been written down, and this is, you can see a slightly more westernized set of letters, and also they write the Berbers from left to right, unlike Arabic. I've got 2 pictures to end with, showing you a book that was in the guest house. The family have 3 sons, and this is the youngest son, and he's featured in a book about the world's children from different parts of the world. And where it says secret language, he says that he and his brothers can speak in Berber, and their mother, who is French, doesn't understand what they're saying, so they can keep secrets from her. Their father is Berber. The children are educated in France, although he's too young to go at the moment. And the family actually left while we were there, just for a day or so, to visit one of their sons at school in France. And they never came back while we were there, because there were no flights by the time they came to want to return a couple of days later. And the only way they were going to get back, apparently, was to go to England in order to get a flight back to Morocco, because there were no flights by then from France or from Spain. He explains in the book that he lives among the Argan trees, and he explains that his father is the owner of the lodge, is a Berber, and his mother is French, and she's a teacher. So he would speak French, Arabic, and Berber. And here he is. You can see him in a bit more close up. They were a delightful family. They were delightful people, the Berbers, and the experience was wonderful. We were lucky to get back, because when we got to the airport, there were people from France who were having their flights cancelled and they couldn't get home. We wouldn't have been able to go on this holiday if it had been about a week or two later. When we got back to England, it was just 1 week before the country was locked down. So we're very conscious that a lot of people didn't have a holiday, a lot of people didn't go abroad, but we were very lucky to have these 2 trips early in the year. And we hope we've been able to show you something of the delightful places we visited.
Thank you, Nick, for your talk. I think Nick will finish his screen share now, but if anybody has any questions they would like to ask, please feel free to unmute yourself and please ask Nick your questions. He'll be more than happy to answer.
I don't know what happens.
No one's speaking up at the moment, so I'll start on. I must admit, I'm ashamed of my ignorance, but I hadn't really heard of argan trees. But obviously, you said you bought some of the oil back for cooking with. But did you actually get to sample any of the biscuits made from the stuff while you were there?
The biscuits are for donkeys.
Oh, sorry, yes, they are. But I mean, did you? Sorry, yes, you're quite true. Yes.
No, we
Give everybody a laugh.
We ate a lot of lovely food.
But you don't use argan in any of it other than for oil for cooking.
They don't anymore because it's too valuable. We bought back spices and pastes, and we'd had the cooking lessons, so we bought menus back, and we cooked with argan oil at home to make tagines until it ran out, and now we use like the Berbers, we have to use sunflower oil
or olive oil. I mean, originally I thought argan oil was just a version of olive oil, but they're not related. I mean, they're similar. You get oils from these 2 trees, and they look quite similar in some ways, but they are not related.
Is the flavour significantly different, or?
No, I would think the oil's a bit lighter and a bit yellower in colour. But until I learned that they were different, I would have said they were kind of quite similar sort of thing. One other thing we did discover, and we brought some back, is they make this, it's called amlu, which is argan oil and honey and very finely chopped nuts, almonds, which is absolutely delicious. And they'd have it, sometimes you'd have it for a meal over bananas or with fruit or something, or you'd mix it with yogurt at breakfast time. That was lovely. But just one example of traditional food, but yes.
I'm very ignorant. I always thought tagine was a piece of pottery. It's some sort of dish, is it?
No, it's the cooking vessel. You know, that conical shape that was on top of the charcoal burner.
Oh.
That cooking pot is the tagine.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
But you call the food that you cook in it is a tagine as well.
That's
It's
what.
a bit
That's
like
what
we would say we're having a casserole, but you can
Yes.
call a dish a casserole. It's a casserole
Right.
dish with a lid.
Thank you.
So
Yes.
it's like a tagine dish with a lid, but it's the tagine as well as the food. Yes.
But we
Thank you.
at home, if we make a tagine, we make it in an ordinary casserole dish.
Yes.
Some people, I don't know, it's a bit of a cheat, really. They make something in England and then they put it in one of those pots and take it to the table.
I think the idea of the pot is traditionally it's cooked over coals, or and the lid is so designed so that there's a little hole, funnel hole, so it doesn't get too hot and boil over, but at the same time it keeps quite a lot of the steam in to keep it moist.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes, yes.
I think it was Morocco. There was somewhere that you went that you said they'd only had 2 days of rain in the last year. Is
Yeah.
that usual, or was it,
No, they ought to get more rain. Yeah. They ought to get more rain in our winter time. So they've suffered, and that's probably partly why it looks so dry and so parched and so overgrazed. Yeah, it's unthinkable, isn't it? 2 days of proper rain is all they had. And that the boy featured in the book at the end, he says on one of the sections in it that in his lifetime, and he was 8 years old when the book was printed, he's only seen a rainstorm twice in his life.
Oh, thank you, Nick.
I'm just going to go back to the Spanish trip. We got you to Zaragoza on the train, and of course we're keen train users. How did you get back?
By train. We went from Zaragoza to Barcelona again, and stayed in the same hotel. And then the next morning we got all the way home, Barcelona to Paris, across Paris, and then Gare du Nord to St Pancras.
Just amazing.
Pancras to Leicester.
Yeah, no, we got all the way back
Yes.
to Leicester, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah. We were lucky enough a number of years ago to go to Morocco by train, which was very good. And of course, they've got a lot of new high-speed train lines there now. So I would think it would be quite feasible to get to Agadir by train.
I'm sure it would, yes.
I mean, we went down through Spain and stopped on the way, obviously. But it was very good.
We learned a lesson, really, that we had an hour and a half probably to cross Paris, and it was we got caught out because the train was late.
Yes,
yeah.
But that so you just have to sort of think about if you get a guide to a route or a journey with changes that you need to allow more time to change quite often.
Yes, I think the metro is quite efficient, but I have to say that we normally do take a taxi from Gare du Nord.
Yes,
onward,
it wasn't so much the metro this time; it was the actual train from it was Eurostar basically in Kent and north of Paris. But they were very good at the Paris station. They just we just said we missed the train because we'd been late arriving, and they just changed our tickets for the next one. There were only 2 trains to Barcelona from Paris in a day. So but anyway, that's one of the joys of travel.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think you were unlucky because our experience is that the Eurostars were either on time or even a little early.
Yeah, exactly. We were, because we've been on it before in other places, and it's been absolutely wonderful. But just this one time, we just had to have a very nice French lunch in a French restaurant rather than sandwiches, so it wasn't too painful.
Very good, very good. Yeah, very interesting talks, both.
Thank you.
Both parts. Thank you, Nick, and for the photos. So well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Fascinating.
Yes, and I think I'll echo Derek's sentiments and Pauline. So on behalf of the group, thank you very much, Nick, and your assistant Prue for a lovely talk. Well, 2 talks this evening. I mean, they were both absolutely fantastic. The scenery and the amount of wildlife in both of them was brilliant. And I was really quite struck by. You don't see Spain particularly in documentaries in the wintertime, do you? And so I was struck by really how dry it looked at that time of year, and in some ways not dissimilar to parts of Morocco from that point of view, but absolutely fascinating. And I think the highlight of the Spanish trip obviously had to be the vultures and the feeding of them, I think. So that was certainly quite spectacular. And then obviously down in Morocco, the highlight has to be the Argan trees, isn't it? Totally. So thank you very much again, and I'll hand over to you, Nick, to finish the meeting. Well, thank you.
Right. Well, as we know, this is the last one before the summer break, and we might be back in the school in September, or we might be on Zoom. But we've got a full program coming up, and thank you to Jan, who has enabled this to be possible, along with support from Peter and Alan Hames. I'm sure some societies would have folded, and thank you all for your support to help us keep going, and all the new people that have come in, and it's really been very successful. So we'll say good night and have a good summer, and I hope it stops raining for us.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Bye.